9. Most terrifying archaeological discoveries. Experts wish they had never found. A mummy has remained astonishingly intact for more than 500 years, with its hair, teeth, and even brains still preserved. An ancient city held the remains of dozens of young women who appear to have been buried alive. A dummy hanging inside an amusement park turned out to be a real human corpse that had been drifting from place to place for more than half a century. These are just a few of the most terrifying archaeological discoveries ever made. Discoveries surrounded by mysteries that, even to this day, remain unsolved. Hello everyone, and welcome back to Ancient History. This is the place where we uncover the forgotten pages of history, explore civilizations that vanished long ago, and investigate the archaeological discoveries that have shocked the world. In today's video, we'll take a look at the 9 most horrifying archaeological discoveries, findings that even the world's leading experts would never want to encounter. Each story is another piece of an incredible mystery, from mummies that have remained almost perfectly preserved for thousands of years, to ancient tombs containing disturbing sacrificial rituals and mysterious ruins that continue to leave modern science searching for answers. So, are the things hidden deep beneath the earth simply remnants of history, or do they still conceal secrets that humanity has yet to understand? Join me as we search for the answers to those questions in today's video. And be sure to prepare yourself, because I believe that the closer you get to the end of this video, the more amazed you'll be by discoveries that seem almost impossible to exist in the real world. Now, without making you wait any longer, let's get started. 2,000-year-old pair of skeletons, covered in gold and precious gems, the two saints of Germany. Can you believe that inside an ancient church in Germany rest two nearly 2,000-year-old skeletons that are adorned with such breathtaking splendor they look more like legendary kings than human remains? It may sound unbelievable, because when we think of ancient skeletons, we usually imagine dusty bones buried deep beneath the earth or hidden inside forgotten tombs. But this discovery is completely different. These two skeletons were never concealed underground. Instead, they are displayed with great honor inside large glass cases, dressed in magnificent ceremonial robes embroidered with gold, decorated with countless precious gemstones, and crowned with dazzling royal crowns. It is a sight that leaves nearly every first-time visitor speechless. So who were these individuals? Why are they still honored in such an extraordinary way after nearly 2 millennia? And what has drawn thousands of visitors from around the world to see these remarkable skeletons with their own eyes? Let's uncover the answers together. Our destination is Fürstenfeld Abbey Church, located near the city of Munich in southern Germany. This historic church has stood for centuries and is famous for preserving 2 extraordinary Christian relics. Ever since the 2 skeletons were brought here centuries ago for safekeeping and veneration, the church has become both a pilgrimage site for Christians and a popular destination for visitors. Even today, as people step into the church's peaceful interior, many are astonished by the sight of 2 skeletons lavishly decorated like priceless treasures. The first skeleton belongs to Saint Hyacinth of Caesarea, who is believed to have died in AD 108 at only 12 years old. What makes this relic especially striking is the beautifully crafted crown resting upon the skull and the lower jaw, adorned with colorful precious gemstones. The entire skeleton is dressed in an elaborately embroidered garment woven with gold thread, creating an image that is both majestic and deeply sacred. Behind this dazzling appearance, however, lies a heartbreaking story. According to Christian tradition, Hyacinth was arrested in Rome during a period of intense persecution against Christians. The authorities demanded that he renounce his faith and worship the ancient Roman gods instead. As if that were not enough, they also forced him to eat meat that was forbidden according to his religious beliefs. Yet despite being only 12 years old, Hyacinth refused to surrender. Rather than betray his faith, he chose to endure starvation until his final breath. That extraordinary sacrifice led Christians to honor him as a symbol of unwavering faith and unshakable devotion. And if Hyacinth's story is already moving, the second skeleton carries an equally tragic fate. It belongs to Saint Clemens, who is believed to have died in Rome around AD 95. During a time when Christianity was still considered an outlawed religion, Clemens remained steadfast in his beliefs despite the danger. His unwavering faith ultimately led to his execution by beheading. After his death, he was recognized as a Christian martyr, and great care was taken to preserve his remains. Over the centuries, skilled artisans adorned his skeleton with gold, precious gemstones, and exquisitely embroidered fabrics as a tribute to his sacrifice and as an expression of gratitude and profound respect for a man who gave his life for his faith. At this point, many of you may be wondering, why would anyone cover human skeletons with gold and precious gems? What does it symbolize? In fact, throughout much of Europe, particularly between the 16th and 18th centuries, holy relics were regarded as sacred symbols of Christianity. To believers, saints who sacrificed their lives for their faith deserved the highest possible honor. For that reason, their remains were often dressed in magnificent ceremonial garments and adorned with jewelry made of gold, silver, and precious gemstones. This lavish decoration was never intended to display wealth or luxury. Instead, it served to honor the saints' sacrifice, courage, unwavering faith, and spiritual devotion. Thanks to this remarkable tradition, the world can still admire rare and extraordinary relics like those preserved inside Fürstenfeld Abbey Church today. But these famous skeletons are only part of the story. The church itself also has a fascinating history. The church was built in the mid-13th century by Louis II, Duke of Bavaria, under the order of Pope Alexander IV. According to historical records, the construction of the church was an act of penance after Louis II was believed to have been responsible for the death of his first wife. Since then, the church has served not only as a sacred pilgrimage destination, but also as a silent witness to centuries of German history. As you can see, beneath the shimmering gold and sparkling gemstones lies far more than artistic beauty. These relics tell powerful stories of courage, sacrifice, and unwavering faith that have endured the test of time. These two skeletons are not simply nearly 2,000-year-old archaeological remains. They stand as powerful reminders of one of the most turbulent periods in Christian history, a time when people were willing to sacrifice even their own lives to defend what they believed. What about you? If you had the opportunity to visit Fürstenfeld Abbey Church and see these gold-covered, jewel-encrusted skeletons with your own eyes, what would your first reaction be? Would you feel amazement, curiosity, or deep admiration? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. 1,700-year-old giant mummy on the Silk Road. Imagine one day wandering into an ancient tomb hidden deep within the barren deserts of China, only to find the body of a man standing nearly 6 feet 6 inches tall, with his thick brown hair, long beard, and even his eyelashes still astonishingly intact after more than 1,700 years. Would you believe it was real? If not, then join me as we travel to China's Tarim Basin, where something exactly like this truly happened. The story began in 1995, when archaeologists excavated the ancient Yingpan Cemetery, located near the Yingpan Oasis settlement in the northeastern Tarim Basin within China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. Among the many ancient burials they uncovered, one mummy stood out so dramatically that it immediately captured the attention of scientists around the world. The mummy belonged to a man who would later become known as the Yingpan Man. Believe it or not, his appearance alone was enough to leave anyone speechless. According to researchers and archaeological experts, Yingpan Man lived sometime during the 4th or 5th century AD, approximately 1,500 to 1,700 years ago. What made him truly extraordinary was his height, an incredible 6 feet 6 inches, a stature that was exceptionally rare for people of his era. Although his body had naturally dried out over time, his facial features remained remarkably recognizable. His thick brown hair, long beard, eyebrows, and even his eyelashes had all been preserved in astonishing condition. Thanks to the uniquely hot and arid climate of the Tarim Basin, nature itself protected his body for more than a millennium, making Yingpan Man one of the most famous and best-preserved mummies ever discovered in the region. But it wasn't only his unusual appearance that puzzled scientists. As archaeologists continued examining his tomb, they uncovered exquisitely crafted garments along with numerous valuable burial goods. Together, these discoveries strongly suggested that he was far from an ordinary individual. He was most likely a member of the nobility or the upper class, someone who held considerable status and influence in the society of his time. Even so, the biggest question remains unanswered. Who was Yingpan Man really? One theory suggests that he belonged to the Sogdians, an Iranian people renowned as wealthy merchants who played a crucial role in connecting civilizations along the Silk Road. However, many scholars believe he was more likely an influential noble from the kingdom of Shan Shan, an oasis kingdom that controlled some of the most important trade routes in the Tarim Basin during late antiquity. Of course, these are still only theories. To search for answers, scientists conducted a variety of modern analyses on his skeletal remains. The results only made the mystery even more fascinating. Chemical signatures preserved in his bones and teeth revealed that Yingpan man had lived in the Tarim Basin for nearly his entire life, rather than arriving there from another region shortly before his death. This finding ruled out several earlier theories, but it still wasn't enough to determine his exact ethnic origin or cultural identity. So, who was Yingpan man in the end? Was he a wealthy merchant, a powerful nobleman, or simply a living symbol of the cultural blending that flourished along the Silk Road? More than 1,700 years later, that mystery still has no definitive answer. Perhaps that is exactly why this extraordinary mummy has become such a powerful testament to the cultural diversity, international exchange, and untold stories that once unfolded along the most famous trade route of the ancient world. What do you think? Do you have your own theory about who Yingpan man really was? If so, don't hesitate to leave a comment below. We'd love to hear your thoughts and discuss it together. 3,000-year-old mummy found in China's desert with a bizarre appearance that astonished the world. The story began in September 1985 when archaeologists excavated the Zeghunluk Cemetery, located about 3.7 miles south of the town of Churchen, now known as Qiemo, in China's Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region on the edge of the famous Taklamakan Desert. While surveying the cemetery, which contained hundreds of ancient graves, the archaeological team uncovered an almost perfectly intact tomb labeled 85QZM2. At the time, no one could have imagined that this single burial would contain one of the most famous mummies in the history of archaeology, a man now known as Churchen Man, also referred to as Cherchenman or David. And yet, that is exactly what they found. The moment the coffin was opened, the archaeologists were stunned. Before them lay the remarkably well-preserved body of an adult man, despite the fact that he had died around 1000 BC, more than 3,000 years ago. Researchers estimate that he was about 50 years old when he died and stood between 5 feet 9 inches and 5 feet 10 inches tall, an impressive height for someone living during that period. But what amazed everyone even more was his extraordinary appearance. His reddish-brown hair, streaked with gray, still framed his high cheekbones. His long, slightly hooked nose, full lips, and reddish beard remained clearly visible after more than 3 millennia. Looking at his face, it is almost impossible to believe that this was someone who had been buried beneath the earth for over 3,000 years. Experts also discovered that Churchen Man had been buried wearing exceptionally well-crafted clothing, including a red twill-woven tunic, striped wool trousers featuring a tartan-like pattern, and boots made from white deerskin. Even more fascinating were the yellow and purple spiral designs painted on both sides of his face, along with sun-like symbols. For many years, people mistakenly believed these markings were ancient tattoos. However, after careful examination, experts confirmed that they were actually decorative paintings made with yellow ochre pigment and applied shortly before his burial. Interestingly, Churchen Man was not buried alone. Inside the burial chamber were the remains of 3 women, while the grave next to his contained an infant. The baby had been wrapped in a crimson burial shroud and was wearing a blue cashmere wool cap. Placed beside the child were a cup made from a cow horn and a sheep's udder, which archaeologists believe may have been used to hold milk for the baby's journey into the afterlife. Small details like these have provided archaeologists with valuable insights into the religious beliefs and burial customs of the ancient people who lived in the Tarim Basin. Many of you are probably wondering how a body, along with clothing and other organic materials, could survive for more than 3,000 years without being intentionally mummified like the famous Egyptian mummies. That was exactly the question scientists spent years trying to answer. According to experts, nature itself created the perfect conditions for preservation. The tomb was constructed from mud bricks and covered with layers of reeds and desert shrubs. Churchen Man's body was placed on branches and woven mats to minimize contact with moisture. His legs were bent and supported by a wooden frame, helping stabilize the body while allowing air to circulate more freely around it. slowing the natural process of decomposition. Most importantly, the entire cemetery was built on salt-rich sand in an area known locally as Tuzlakash, a name that literally means salt rock. The naturally high salt content, combined with the intensely hot, dry climate of the Tarim Basin, created an environment that was almost ideal for preserving not only human remains, but also clothing, wooden objects, textiles, and many other organic materials for thousands of years. That is precisely why, even today, Church and Man is regarded as one of the best preserved Tarim mummies ever discovered. The $1 million mummy that hung as a theme park prop for 66 years without anyone realizing it was a real person. Can you believe that some of history's greatest secrets weren't buried underground or hidden inside ancient pyramids and forgotten tombs? Instead, they existed quietly in plain sight, right in the middle of a place where thousands of people walked by every single day. Even more disturbing, no one realized the truth for decades. The story we're about to explore is one of the strangest and most unbelievable cases ever recorded in American history. A real human corpse was mistaken for nothing more than a decorative dummy and hung inside an amusement park for years before its true identity was discovered by pure accident. The story began in December 1976 at New Pike Amusement Park in Long Beach, California. At the time, the production crew of the hit television series The $6 Million Man arrived at the park to film a new episode. While preparing the set, the director noticed a dummy hanging from a rope that looked unusually lifelike, and honestly, a little too creepy. He asked a crew member to move it to another location, but the moment the employee touched it, one of the dummy's arms suddenly broke off. The paint and phosphorescent coating peeled away, revealing dried human skin and bone beneath. It wasn't a movie prop at all. It was a real human mummy. The crew immediately contacted the police. When officers from the Long Beach Police Department arrived and launched an investigation, the body's identity was finally uncovered. It belonged to Elmer McCurdy, a train robber who had been shot and killed in the early 20th century. Ironically, McCurdy was never the notorious outlaw or mastermind behind million-dollar heists that many people later imagined him to be. His final robbery brought him only $46 and 2 bottles of whiskey. When law enforcement surrounded him after the robbery, McCurdy reportedly declared that they would never take him alive. In the end, he was killed during the ensuing gunfight. Yet what ultimately made Elmer McCurdy famous wasn't his criminal career. It was the bizarre fate of his body after his death. With no relatives coming forward to claim his remains, McCurdy's body was embalmed with arsenic, preventing it from decomposing. Seeing that the corpse had remained remarkably well preserved, a funeral home operator came up with a way to make money from it. He posed the body standing upright inside the funeral home, placed a gun in its hand, and opened the doors to paying visitors. Anyone who wanted to see the corpse had to drop a coin into the mummy's mouth. Little by little, a human body became a money-making attraction. Over the following years, Elmer McCurdy's remains passed from one carnival operator to another, eventually ending up with traveling circuses and amusement parks. At one point, 2 men even pretended to be McCurdy's brothers, claiming they wanted to give him a proper burial. In reality, they simply intended to use the body as another traveling attraction, touring it across the United States. From Texas to Los Angeles, from wax museums to low-budget films, and finally to New Pike Amusement Park, McCurdy's mummy was hung up, displayed, and treated like nothing more than a decorative prop for more than 6 decades, with almost no one realizing it was an actual human body. It wasn't until December 8, 1976, when the Long Beach Police Department officially opened an investigation and transferred the remains to the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office, that the decades-long secret was finally exposed. The autopsy confirmed that the remains belonged to a real person. The cause of death was a gunshot wound, and the body had been preserved with arsenic. Just 1 day later, on December 9, 1976, the family of the amusement park's owner confirmed that the victim was indeed Elmer McCurdy. Finally, in 1977, after wandering across America for more than 66 years as little more than a sideshow attraction, Elmer McCurdy was given a proper burial in Guthrie, Oklahoma, near the grave of outlaw Bill Doolin. With that, one of the strangest, most unsettling, and most unbelievable journeys in the history of modern mummies finally came to an end. It truly is one of the most bizarre mummy stories ever recorded in modern history, wouldn't you agree? the 200-year-old mummy of a Vietnamese king that astonished archaeologists. My friends, if someone told you that after lying deep underground for more than 200 years, a human body had remained so well preserved that its joints could still move, its skin still retained its elasticity, and its beard had barely disappeared, would you believe it? I certainly wouldn't have at first. It sounds more like something out of a movie than a real historical event, but incredibly, it is a true story, one that stunned the entire archaeological community in Vietnam. What's even more remarkable is that it all began with nothing more than a single swing of a farmer's hoe while he was digging in his garden. That seemingly ordinary discovery led to one of the most famous archaeological excavations in Vietnamese history and revealed an extraordinary method of preserving human remains that continues to amaze scientists even today. The story took place in February 1958 in Bai Truc Village, Xuan Giang Commune, Tho Xuan District, Thanh Hoa Province, Vietnam. While renovating his family's garden, a local farmer unexpectedly struck a massive outer burial vault buried deep beneath the ground. As he continued digging, he discovered that inside the vault was an exquisitely crafted lacquered wooden coffin decorated with gold. What puzzled everyone present was that despite knowing the tomb had been sealed for hundreds of years, there was absolutely no odor of decay or decomposition. Instead, a faint and surprisingly pleasant fragrance drifted from inside the coffin. As soon as local authorities were notified, they immediately secured the site and reported the discovery to higher levels of government. The case quickly attracted nationwide attention. It even prompted Vietnam's Prime Minister's office to send preservation specialists to inspect the site in person. To prevent further damage, the portions of the outer burial vault that had been accidentally broken were sealed with cement, and the tomb was placed under strict local protection for several years. It was not until 1964 that an archaeological team from Vietnam's Ministry of Culture officially excavated the entire tomb and transported the intact coffin to the Vietnam History Museum for detailed study. Through careful analysis, experts discovered that the outer burial vault had been constructed from a mixture of oyster shell lime, sand, molasses, and crushed under-fired bricks. Once these materials were thoroughly mixed and tightly packed around all 6 sides of the coffin, they hardened into a solid mass remarkably similar to modern concrete, effectively sealing out air and moisture for centuries. On April 2, 1964, a special ceremony was held at the Vietnam History Museum in the presence of Prime Minister Pham Van Dong, along with many of the country's leading archaeologists and historians. When the coffin was finally opened, everyone present was left speechless. The coffin itself had been crafted from ngok am wood, also known as po mu wood, a species famous for its resistance to insects and its exceptional preservation qualities. The interior walls were lined with multiple additional layers of the same wood to create an even tighter seal. Even more remarkably, the coffin featured a double-bottom design. The space between the 2 bottoms had been filled with a layer of roasted rice approximately 4 inches thick. Above it rested a wooden board about 0.8 inches thick, carved with 7 circular holes arranged in the shape of the Big Dipper, a design believed to carry important spiritual and feng shui significance during that era. Yet the most astonishing discovery of all was the body itself. Experts identified the remains as those of King Le Du Tong, the 11th emperor of the restored later Le dynasty and the 22nd ruler of the later Le dynasty in Vietnamese history. His birth name was Le Duy Duong, and he was the eldest son of King Le Hai Tong. The king's body had been dressed in 18 layers of clothing and wrapped in 10 layers of burial cloth, all of which had survived in remarkably intact condition. Covering the body was a silk brocade quilt, followed by an imperial robe embroidered with 5 clawed dragons, a dragon-embroidered ceremonial cloth, and a stone tablet engraved with the words, Emperor Du Tong of the Le dynasty. This inscription definitively confirmed the identity of the individual inside the coffin. The garments also became the first complete collection of royal clothing from the Le dynasty ever preserved by the Vietnam History Museum. Even more remarkably, the king was still wearing silk socks and embroidered brocade shoes. His knees rested on a brocade pillow stuffed with cotton, while both ears had been carefully sealed with cotton wrapped in silk. Covering his face was another embroidered silk cloth decorated with a dragon. At its center was the Chinese character meaning longevity, while each of the 4 corners featured the character Wan, a sacred Buddhist symbol. One particularly fascinating detail was the king's short-cropped hair, which provided important evidence that he had shaved his head and become a Buddhist monk during the final years of his life. However, there was one detail that left everyone completely astonished. When the experts gently lifted the embroidered cloth covering the king's face, they witnessed an extraordinarily rare sight. At first, King Ledutong's face appeared light gray. Only after a few minutes of exposure to the air did it gradually change to the same uniform gray color as the rest of his body. Although the body had naturally shrunk over time, the joints in his arms and legs were still flexible, and his fingers could still be bent and straightened. Even more astonishing, the beard beneath his chin remained black with only a few strands of gray, while many areas of his skin still retained an incredible degree of elasticity after more than 2 centuries. To this day, no one has been able to fully explain exactly why the mummy was preserved so extraordinarily well. What we do know is that following this historic excavation, the remains of King Ledutong were carefully preserved in the basement of the Vietnam History Museum for 46 years, allowing researchers to continue studying them. Finally, in January 2010, the king's remains were returned to his homeland in Thanh Hoa Province, where they were reburied according to traditional Vietnamese funeral rites. The 500-year-old mummy of an Indian monk whose hair and teeth are still intact. Imagine discovering a body that is more than 500 years old, yet still has hair on its head, a full set of intact teeth, clearly visible fingernails, and skin that is simply dried out instead of decaying. Would you think it was a miracle, the result of a spiritual ritual, or the achievement of a preservation technique far ahead of its time? If you've spent countless hours wondering about the answer, then join me as we travel back to 1975 to uncover this remarkable mystery. That was the year archaeologists conducting research at Ki Gampa Monastery, also known as Ki Kai or Ki Monastery, made an astonishing discovery. Located in the Spiti Valley of Himachal Pradesh in northern India, near the Tibetan border, the monastery became the site of an incredible find: the nearly perfectly preserved body of a monk seated in the meditation posture. The remains were identified as those of Sangha Tenzin, a revered Buddhist monk who is believed to have passed away approximately 500 years ago. From the very beginning, the discovery stunned the scientific community. Why? Because this monk's remains were nothing like the Egyptian mummies wrapped in linen and treated with specialized chemicals. Instead, his skin had simply dried over time while remaining firmly attached to his body. His hair was still clearly visible, his teeth were almost completely intact, and even his fingernails remained in place, creating the uncanny impression that time itself had stopped at the very moment of his death. According to archaeologists, Ki Gampa is the largest and oldest monastery in the Spiti Valley. It has long served not only as one of the Himalayas' most important Buddhist centers, but also as a training monastery for hundreds of lamas over many centuries. Even today, about 300 monks continue to live and study there, making the discovery of such an extraordinary mummy within the monastery even more mysterious. Over the years, scientists have proposed numerous theories to explain how Sangha Tenzin's body could have remained almost perfectly preserved for half a millennium. The best-known explanations suggest that the monk underwent a process of self-mummification, sometimes referred to as natural self-preservation. This is an extraordinarily rare practice in human history and can succeed only under a combination of extremely harsh conditions, including an exceptionally dry climate, low temperatures, and an environment with almost no moisture where bacteria cannot easily survive. Unlike the famous chemical mummification techniques of ancient Egypt, some Buddhist monks in Japan and Tibet followed an entirely different path. While still alive, they began an incredibly strict spiritual discipline. Their food intake was gradually reduced until they consumed only nutrient-poor plants, slowly eliminating body fat. They completely avoided foods such as rice, barley, and beans because these could increase fat reserves, making the body more susceptible to decomposition after death. Some accounts even suggest that shortly before death, the body was carefully dried using the heat from candles placed close to the skin to remove as much remaining moisture as possible. But according to some historical records, the process did not end there. After the monk passed away, his disciples reportedly placed his body inside a small underground chamber for approximately 3 years, allowing it to continue drying naturally before completing the final stages of preservation. As a result, his body retained its meditation posture, resembling a sacred statue inside a Buddhist temple. Of course, this is only one theory. Western researchers have proposed another explanation. Based on analyses of the skeleton, they suggest that Sangha Tenzin may have consumed a special herbal preparation or even a toxic substance before his death. Such a substance could have inhibited bacterial growth, causing the body to gradually shrink and dry out rather than decompose in the normal way. Another group of experts believes that during the final months of his life, the monk ate and drank almost nothing, reducing his body fat and muscle mass to an absolute minimum. With so little organic material remaining to support bacterial growth, decomposition would have occurred much more slowly. To maintain his meditation posture, some researchers believe he tied cords connecting his neck, arms, and legs. After his death, these cords would have continued holding his body in the same cross-legged seated position that we still see today. The 1,000-year-old gilded mummy discovered in China. When most people think of mummies, they immediately picture the Egyptian pharaohs, their bodies wrapped in layers of linen and preserved with precious oils and aromatic resins. But what if I told you that Asia is also home to a mummy that is about 1,000 years old? One so remarkably well preserved that when doctors examined it using a modern CT scanner, they discovered that its brain and entire skeletal system were still intact inside the body. Would you believe it? What makes the story even more extraordinary is that the person inside the mummy was neither a powerful emperor nor a legendary military commander. He was simply a Buddhist monk who devoted his entire life to spreading the teachings of Buddhism. For centuries, his remains disappeared without a trace. Then, they unexpectedly resurfaced inside a cave, giving rise to a mystery that modern science has yet to fully explain. So what allowed this body to seemingly defy the passage of time? Let's uncover this fascinating story together. The story begins in the 1970s, when a research team surveying a cave in China unexpectedly discovered the remains of the Buddhist monk Xian, who is believed to have passed away roughly 1,000 years earlier. Before that discovery, the monk's remains had virtually disappeared from the historical record. No one knew exactly where he had been buried, and no one imagined that after centuries of being lost, his body could still be preserved in such astonishing condition. The discovery quickly attracted the attention of archaeologists and Buddhist scholars around the world. However, the event that made this story internationally famous occurred many years later. On July 8th, at Dinghui Temple in Wuhan, north of Hebei Province, China, experts decided to perform a CT scan on the entire body of monk Xian. The examination was conducted publicly in the presence of numerous Buddhist monks, members of the media, and many Buddhist devotees. Everyone eagerly waited to see what remained inside the mummy after more than 1,000 years. Then the images appeared on the monitor, and the entire room fell almost completely silent in amazement. Not only was the monk's skull still intact, but his brain was also still present inside the cranial cavity, an extraordinarily rare finding for human remains of such great age. His entire skeleton, including the ribs, spine, and joints, had retained an almost complete structure. After the examination, Dr. Wu Yongqing, who personally participated in the CT scan, stated that the findings far exceeded the research team's expectations. According to Dr. Wu, the monk's skeleton remained remarkably strong. His upper jaw was intact, nearly all of his teeth were still present, and neither the ribs nor the joints showed signs of significant deterioration. For professionals working in medicine and archaeology, this was an exceptionally rare phenomenon. According to numerous ancient historical records, monk Xian originally came from India. He lived during the Khitan dynasty, which existed from AD 916 to 1125. During that period, he traveled thousands of miles from India to what is now northeastern China in order to spread the teachings of Buddhism. In addition to preaching, he devoted many years to translating 10 Buddhist scriptures into Chinese, making an important contribution to the growth and spread of Buddhism throughout the region. Because of these extraordinary accomplishments, the Khitan king held monk Xian in the highest regard and bestowed upon him the title of Master of Buddhism. Even today, some of the scriptures he translated survive as inscriptions carved into stone, providing invaluable resources for historians and scholars of religion. After the monk passed away, his disciples carefully safeguarded his remains. However, As centuries of historical upheaval unfolded, the location where his body had been kept was gradually lost. It was not until the 1970s that his remains were accidentally rediscovered inside a cave, giving scientists the opportunity to study one of the most extraordinary mummies ever found in Asia. In 2011, the mummy of monk Qi Xian was officially enshrined at Dinghui Temple, where thousands of Buddhist pilgrims and visitors from around the world continue to come to pay their respects and learn about the life of this revered monk. According to plans announced at the time, his remains would eventually be transferred to a newly constructed temple once it was completed, providing even better preservation conditions. To this day, the gilded mummy of monk Qi Xian remains one of the greatest mysteries in Asian archaeology. More than 1,000 years after his death, the fact that his brain and skeletal system remain almost completely intact continues to raise questions that modern science has yet to answer. So what do you think? Was this simply the result of extraordinarily favorable natural conditions? Or could it be the product of an ancient preservation technique that has long since been lost? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Who knows, your perspective might inspire a fascinating new theory about this remarkable mystery that still has no definitive answer. Perfectly preserved. 1,500-year-old coffin discovered in China. The story began when archaeologists were conducting a survey on the grasslands of Silin Gol League in the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Region of northern China. During the excavation, they unexpectedly uncovered an ancient coffin buried deep beneath the ground. Although the discovery immediately attracted widespread attention within the archaeological community, what astonished everyone wasn't just the coffin's age. It was its remarkable state of preservation after more than 1.5 millennia underground. As soon as the coffin was brought to the surface, experts began a detailed examination. Their initial analysis indicated that it dated back approximately 1,500 years to the Northern Wei dynasty, which ruled from AD 386 to 534. This was a pivotal period in Chinese history, marked by major political, cultural, and social transformations that helped shape the civilization of later dynasties. According to experts at the local museum, the coffin is unusually large and, remarkably, has remained almost completely intact despite spending centuries buried beneath the earth. For archaeologists, this is an extraordinarily valuable discovery because many ancient coffins found in the past had already decayed, been badly damaged, or were looted by grave robbers centuries ago. For that reason, finding a coffin preserved in such excellent condition raised hopes that it might reveal important new information about the lives of ancient people. However, the more researchers studied it, the more questions they encountered. The greatest mystery, of course, was the identity of the person buried inside. Ordinarily, ancient tombs contain clues such as epitaphs, grave goods, inscriptions, or other artifacts that help identify the deceased. But in this case, nothing proved to be so straightforward. After their initial examination, the research team was still unable to find any clear evidence capable of confirming who lay inside the coffin. The absence of those crucial clues transformed this 1,500-year-old coffin into one of China's newest archaeological mysteries. Was its owner a government official serving the Northern Wei court, a military commander, a member of the nobility, or simply an ordinary person who happened to receive an unusually elaborate burial? For now, every possibility remains nothing more than a theory awaiting further evidence. To support long-term research, the coffin was later transferred to a local museum, where experts continue to examine it using a variety of modern scientific techniques in hopes of uncovering new clues. From the materials used in its construction and the craftsmanship behind its assembly to the tiniest traces remaining on its surface, every detail has been carefully documented to help solve the mystery of the tomb's owner. According to archaeologists, even though the identity of the individual buried inside remains unknown, the discovery of such a remarkably well-preserved coffin is significant in its own right. It provides valuable information about burial customs, coffin-making techniques, and the daily lives of people living during the Northern Wei dynasty, helping researchers better understand a period of history that existed roughly 1,500 years ago. This discovery is also a reminder that, in archaeology, not every question has an immediate answer. Sometimes an anonymous coffin can open an entirely new chapter of history, requiring scientists to spend years or even decades searching for the truth. So what do you think? Who do you believe was buried inside this 1,500-year-old coffin? Was it a powerful figure whose name has been erased by time, or an ordinary person who unintentionally left behind one of archaeology's greatest mysteries? I'd love to hear your own theory, so be sure to share it in the comments below. 53 young women buried alive reveal a blood-soaked civilization in America. My friends, if I asked you where the most terrifying archaeological site ever discovered in the United States is, what would come to mind? Many people would probably think of ancient cemeteries or Native American burial grounds. But what if I told you there's a place that's even more mysterious and far more haunting? It was once a thriving city nearly 1,000 years ago, home to enormous earthen monuments that look remarkably similar to the pyramids of Egypt. Yet hidden beneath those massive mounds lies a secret so disturbing that it sent chills through even the most experienced archaeologists. Dozens of young women appear to have been buried alive alongside powerful men. The evidence preserved in their skeletal remains suggests that they desperately struggled to escape before being buried forever beneath the earth. The story takes place at the ancient city of Cahokia, located near Collinsville, Illinois. Cahokia was once the largest center of the Mississippian culture, home to indigenous communities that lived in North America roughly 600 to 1,000 years ago. During an archaeological excavation at the site, researchers uncovered a series of discoveries that left the archaeological community stunned. Although many mysteries surrounding the civilization remain unsolved, what was found beneath the ground revealed a society unlike any other. For many years, Cahokia has often been referred to as the mysterious ghost city. According to historical accounts, the site was already abandoned long before Christopher Columbus arrived in the Americas. Surrounding Cahokia are dozens of enormous earthen mounds shaped much like stepped pyramids. Because of this, many people have nicknamed it North America's Pyramid City. Although these structures were built from earth rather than stone like the pyramids of Egypt, their sheer scale continues to amaze researchers, demonstrating the extraordinary organizational abilities and labor force of the ancient people who built them. But the most unsettling discovery wasn't the towering mounds themselves. It was what lay hidden beneath them. Under the direction of anthropologist Timothy Pocketat, an archaeological team excavated a large burial mound located near the center of the ancient city. As layer after layer of soil was carefully removed, they uncovered a scene that left everyone speechless. Inside the burial chamber were the remains of two middle-aged men, but the shocking part was that their bodies had been covered by the remains of 53 young women. What made the discovery even more disturbing was the position of the skeletons. Many of the women's hands were still stretched upward, their fingers curled as though they had desperately clawed at the soil in a final attempt to escape. Archaeologists believe this is compelling evidence that these young women may have been buried alive rather than interred after death. Just imagining their final moments is enough to send chills down anyone's spine. So who were they, and why did they suffer such a tragic fate? Based on the burial arrangement and the positioning of the bodies, many experts believe these young women may have been the concubines or servants of powerful leaders within Cahokian society. According to one theory, when high-ranking men died, the women who depended on them were sacrificed and buried alongside them so they could continue serving them in the afterlife. Rituals of this kind have been documented in several ancient civilizations, but the evidence uncovered at Cahokia is considered one of the clearest and most haunting examples ever discovered in North America. As you've seen, every ancient site, every mummy, and every set of human remains is another piece of the historical puzzle. They help us better understand the civilizations that once flourished, while at the same time leaving behind countless mysteries that modern science still cannot fully explain. So, which discovery did you find the most shocking, haunting, or difficult to believe? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you enjoy exploring mysterious stories from history like these, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the Ancient History channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss our upcoming videos. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.